Hail, and welcome back to my channel. Today we will be discussing the topic, why do protection magic? You may wonder to yourself, why would anybody specifically invest the time in protection magic? Why would anybody be significantly served or helped by this? What are the advantages of learning in depth about protection magic? Why would anybody spend significant time casting protection spells? Isn't that something that you may just want to do in case you find yourself under attack, or that you may want to do when you are faced with particular issues or particular situations? Well, I am someone who is of the opinion that it is better to prevent than it is to heal something. Healing to me should actually be a last resort rather than something that is utilized as a first line of defense. So I therefore specialize in protection magic. And the reason I do that is partially because of what I do, um, but also because I find it to give peace of mind. I find it to be a very valuable tool in my magical practices. Not only that, but also because I find that protection magic is something that actually helps you in more proactive areas of magic and in life in general. Now, what I mean by that is that, for example, when you perform protection magic on, say, your finances, you are basically preventing a lot of, hassle with your money, or if you are protecting yourself, your well-being. If you are, for example, an example that I will be getting into later into the video, if you are providing protection for your travels, you may potentially avert, accidents waiting to happen, or you may prevent people from causing issues in your life by being shitty drivers, getting you into an accident in some way, shape, or form. So let's get started. What exactly is protection magic and how does it work? Protection magic is basically what it says on the package. It is magic meant to protect things. Either it is that simple or straightforward, such as placing magical shielding, barriers, wards, either on oneself, on your loved ones, and this can of course include pets. This can include children. This can include your house, your property. This can include your car, like I mentioned, for travel protection, for example. So usually the idea with such passive protections is to install shielding on someone to deflect hostile magic, such as curses, hexes, crossing someone out, to ward off malicious spirits, to ward off malicious entities, to prevent for example, spiritual infestations of negative entities who may be roaming around and looking for food or for sustenance, if you will, to feed off of. Perhaps you live in an area that is known to be quote unquote haunted by spirits of dead people that are roaming around, and you may want to keep those kinds of influences outside or at least under control. That is a reason to do protection magic on your house. You may want to, for example, if you live in an unsafe area, practice some protection magic on your house to make it less likely that you are going to get burglarized or that you are going to get robbed or something like that along those lines. In an indirect fashion, you may, like I said just now, use it to avert or at least greatly reduce chances of certain things happening, or have harm befall on a person or a particular piece of property, such as maybe your desktop PC or your laptop or your phone or your car, like I mentioned earlier. One thing to keep in mind there is if you perform such spells, and if you do decide to cast such things on your property or on yourself, on your person, it does not necessarily completely stop things. And certainly it doesn't completely stop physical bodily harm in a very direct, literal sense of the word. What I mean by that is you may cast a protection spell on your car to make it less likely to get into an accident. And sure enough, the energies that you put on your car will absolutely work. I've seen this to help avert or redirect the energies or the people even that would be causing accidents or would be prone to causing accidents. And more on that later. But it will not prevent, for example, someone who is really, really pissed off at you to, walk up to your face and punch you in the nose. It's not going to avert that in a direct sense. Like if you protect yourself with magical shielding, you are not going to feel pain from it. You are not going to be completely immunized from, physical attacks or physical pain or anything of that sort. Now, of course, back in the day, you see that Celtic and Germanic warriors, they would, paint their bodies in all these symbols and, tattoos and stuff like that with like woad and all that to keep themselves safe, and they believed that it was a, means to ward off, physical harm, bodily harm. Now, I personally find this to be a little too literal of an interpretation. I'm not quite sure if it works. However, what I do believe is that, of course, everything is energy, and therefore, what it could do in that sense is make sure that a person is less likely to target you. For example, if you are a Germanic warrior on a battlefield and you are facing opposition with like archers or something like that, and they're shooting at you from a distance and you're closing in with your shield and stuff, and maybe if you have those tattoos, then maybe foes are, because of the way that the energy is being affected by those symbols, by that magic, is maybe less likely to target you. I think in that sense, in that indirect sense, that such magic may provide to be effective, but I obviously have never tested this. I'm not a physical, soldier, warrior, whatever you want to call it. So I have no way of testing it, and I wouldn't recommend that anybody who is in that sort of profession that they would directly try to test that out, because putting your life in the hands of something like that is, in my personal opinion, not very wise. But to get that out of the way, there is a indirect effect that, or in the case of energy, a very direct effect, of course. But in terms of actual physical damage being done to your person or to your property, in that sense, I mean, you can cast whatever protection magic you want on your TV, but if somebody grabs a sledgehammer and decides to smash your TV in, I'm sorry, your spells are not going to work to protect against that. So that is something that I really want to emphasize here. Protection magic is not a substitute for, putting actual physical protections or restraints or something along those lines in place in many situations where physical injury or damage is an actual risk. So what it will do, however, protection magic that is reduce the likelihood that physically negative things that are caused by certain energetic patterns will be either stopped from coming your way in that sense or redirected. So to provide you a basic example of what I mean by that is that some of you might, for example, be familiar with the Vegvisir, or however you pronounce it. This is an Icelandic runestave, or a Galderstafur, which is, of course, a compass, which is meant to guide a person who is lost in their on their proper path, and then find their quote-unquote way home, or to wherever their destination is supposed to be at that given time. So in that sense, the Vegvisir is a protective symbol. Now, there is another symbol, which is the Aegishjálmur. I've done a short video on that on my channel. So the Aegishjálmur is, of course, a symbol that is called the Helm of Awe, the Helm of Terror, and it is very much a protective symbol. It is a symbol of magical protection against foreign hostile influences from the nine worlds. Specifically from the other 8 worlds, the way it is drawn, because Midgard is in the center, and then you have the 8 rods or staves leading outward, of course. So I will put some links in the description so that you can check out the names, how they are written, so that you know what to look for and what I'm actually saying, in case you can't, for some reason, make out what I'm actually talking about. So if you combine a Vegvisir with a Aegishjálmur, or a compass with a helm of awe or a helm of terror. And it should not take you too much imagination to be able to combine these two. I mean, that it would be a very, very basic working. They literally have the exact same design, or at least the same design setup, I should say. The symbols are different, of course, in their actual appearance, but an Aegis-Hjálmur and a Vigvizier are very easily combinable, and you will be able to tell that if you look at both of these symbols. So a very basic working of a protection spell for travels that I could give you is if you combine these two. So if you combine these two energies, then you would have a basic protection that would ward off negative influences, and that would still help you find your way home, basically. So that is a working that you could provide on your, for example, your car or on your person. You maybe want to draw that on a piece of paper. You may draw these the combination of these two symbols out, and then you will want to either put it on a piece of paper, empower it, do your speech magic, your word magic, your Galdr, or you may want to, I don't know, however you normally work. Maybe you use herbs, maybe you use candles, colors, maybe you empower it in a different manner. You will then want to maybe perhaps burn your paper, or you do whatever you normally do with it, and that would provide, for example, a very basic basic protection spell for your travels, so that you A, will always find your way to where you are needing to be, and B, that you have protection from hostile outside influences. And if you put that on your car, the result will likely be something along the lines of a version of people who are perhaps bad drivers, who are prone to being into accidents, or who are reckless drivers, or who at that time may be drunk or otherwise negatively impacted in their cognitive abilities, that they may be pushed away from where you are driving, for example. Or alternatively, in a more direct manner, as we discussed in the beginning, it could function as a shield in a very literal, direct sense. So, for example, if you have an enemy who is a practitioner, who may want to launch a curse at you for whatever reason, and they may want to get you into an accident, in a car accident or a motorcycle accident, which is probably one of the more easy, effective ways to kill someone, especially if you live in a state that is heavily reliant on mobile transportation of some kind. So in that sense, a working such as what I have just shown you, or what I just talked about, would provide a direct shield, or a working that would provide hostility to you in such a manner. It could work to block out influences of spirits who may have been enlisted to try and lure you into accidents, or who may be out to hunt you down in such a specific manner. So that is a simple example of combining a Aegis-Hjálmur with a Vigvizier to again get you where you need to be, to guide you when you're lost, and B, to protect you against hostile foreign influences that may be present, or that may be out to get you in some way, shape, or form. Now, this is unfortunately the only example that I will be giving you in this video, but I hope that the idea is clear. The reason I'm only giving you one example is because it is obviously impossible to defend against everything. It is impossible to give you a list of all sorts of possible attacks that could possibly happen. I mean, like I said, I kind of specialize in this stuff, but at the same time, I mean, there's more than likely magical attacks that I have never heard of, never seen executed, never had executed against me, or that I have never executed against someone else. I mean, curses are as varied as there are, practitioners, and as there are, possible designs. The amount of variables in such a thing is literally almost infinite. So it would be impossible to provide such a thing for you in a concrete, exhaustive list. So I hope that the reasons for why you could be, or where you should be practicing protection magic are clear. I mean, it is my personal opinion that anyone with some ambition in the spiritual realms or as a practitioner of the magical arts will sooner or later, in some way, shape, or form, encounter resistance, and that doesn't necessarily have to be from other practitioners. It doesn't necessarily have to be from spirits. It could be from people who are not practitioners. For example, if you are living in an area of very conservative Christians who may be, out to figuratively or literally lynch you. Although the latter, the literal part, is probably, fortunately, a lot more less common nowadays than it was back in the day. But you never know. So these are all things that you may want to work protective magic against. And yes, these things do work because, like I said, in a very indirect manner, protection magic can be very effective, even though it will not protect you against direct bodily, physical or even mental harm. So it will certainly be able to manipulate energies around you in order to at least decrease, if not completely nullify, any risk of certain things happening. Excuse me. But it is certainly also possible that if you are engaging in the metaphysical, that you will make enemies of different practitioners, maybe certain deities who don't like what you're doing, certain spirits who may not like what you're doing. For example, something I see a lot is that someone who starts dabbling in magic, they will start to attract certain spirits from the surrounding area who have a nice little, status quo set up in their feeding habits, their sustenance habits. They have their hierarchies and their established order, and someone who starts meddling with that kind of stuff will invariably start inviting foreign spirits. They will invariably start upsetting the natural order of things, if you will. So that is something that I feel that every practitioner should be prepared for, that they may start experiencing some negativity, because, make no mistake, in my experience, and I'm pretty sure that this is the case everywhere, the spiritual world is unfortunately as much political as the physical world is, if in some cases not actually more so, because there are more, non-incarnate beings than there are incarnate beings, and so most spirits, in my experience, also don't really care. However, there will invariably be groups around you, in your surrounding area, in your city, in your town, whatever, that will, in some way, shape, or form, perhaps start taking offense to whatever it is that you are doing. This is, in my opinion, one reason why one could or should absolutely positively practice protection magic and regularly update your barriers, update your wards, update your protective magics, not just on yourself, but also on your children, perhaps. Although, of course, take it easy on your children, because they are smaller if they are still young. Therefore, they are less able to handle significant amounts of energy thrown at them, because at the end of the day, shielding is exactly that. I have sometimes told people that when you do magical workings for anything, it is an energy alteration. It is taking energy and shaping it in the form of a barrier, in this case, or a shield, or some other form of protection. And in my experience, again, the spiritual works very similarly to the physical, in that there are certain levels of physicality that take place. For example, if I craft you a suit of armor, or if I make you a chainmail shirt, and I throw you that chainmail shirt, and you start wearing it without any sort of conditioning, without any sort of training, without weightlifting, without being used to carrying heavy loads around all day, you are gonna feel it. And that is, in my experience, also the case with protection work. So there is a period of adjustment that you will often find when a person performs even if it is a positive spell. There may be negative temporary downsides, in my experience, again. So what I have often seen is that a person who gets a protection spell done is that they will feel a little under the weather, perhaps, or perhaps they feel a little depleted, drained. There seems to always be a modicum or a degree of adjustment. So do be careful that you don't go overboard with practicing such benign magic on animals or on children, or smaller beings who could have their energy fields more easily disrupted or overburdened by things. That is something that I do want to give you. So if you have a regular healthy adult, the chances of them being able to bear most normal, not excessively overdone protection spells are going to be high. That they're not going to be there's not going to be much risk involved in that. But there should always be consideration taken with physical health, with physical well-being. So and again, as mentioned, protection magic can at the very least help minimize or avert or reduce the chances of nasty things occurring. So for example, if you wish to cast a preventative protection spell on your finances, in that case the energies will do their work. It's not as simple as a shield, but it will likely just be energy that gets sent out, and that will help alleviate, avert, and prevent perhaps even certain financial issues that you may be facing otherwise. So if you expect perhaps that some financially harder times are incoming, it may be wise to do a financial protection spell first, and then you may want to do perhaps abundance magic in order to draw or at least maintain your positive abundance energy. So what are the downsides of protection magic? Well, as I said, there is of course the adjustment that oftentimes happens in my experience. Another thing that you certainly do need to realize is that there is no defense in the world that cannot be breached, just like there is no attack in this world or beyond that cannot be stopped in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I have had magical attacks come through my defenses, and we're talking lifetimes upon lifetimes of protection and shielding and stuff like that I carried with me, that I've also added to in this life extensively. And even then, I have had people find chinks in my armor, if you will. And of course, the sound thing to do is to then retroactively patch that hole in one's defenses, to then remedy that weakness, if you will. Consider it basically, again, to come back to that illustration of the chainmail shirt. So if you are, for example, having a chainmail shirt and there's like a weak patch of like rusty links or something like that would be more easily breached. So what do? You're gonna, brush up those, chain rings, and you're not going to let them just sit there for the opponent to exploit, or you're going to reinforce it somehow. So that is something that is also perhaps to some of you a downside. It is a never-ending sequence, basically. You have to regularly maintain it, meditate, keep yourself healthy, keep yourself fresh, keep yourself rested, because it is also, again in my experience, the case that your shields are as strong as your energy at that present time is. So if a curse gets launched at you, and normally if you were just coming out of bed from 8 hours of sleep, you just had food, you didn't have a lot of stress in the preceding few weeks, normally under normal circumstances that particular curse would in this scenario perhaps have blocked that curse. But because you now have not had proper sleep in 2 days, you went to McDonald's and got a $1 burger, and you have had a lot of stress in the past 3 weeks, to the point where your body is physically clenching up, and you're basically just running on coffee to keep you running. In that case, a curse is more likely to come through your protections. It is more likely to find weaknesses and holes in your barriers, in your wards, and your shielding, because your personal protections are, of course, oftentimes maintained by your personal energy, which means that if your energy weakens, that your shields weaken as well. So that is something that is or should be an incentive to also keep yourself healthy on a physical and mental level, as much as possible, of course. So, protection magic is, in conclusion, not ideal. However, I do feel that it is a very, very important, very basic, very integral part of any practitioner who is serious about their craft. So that is pretty much all I have to say about this. As I mentioned in my previous video, how do I know I'm cursed? I am planning on making a video on healing and what the applications and structures of healing magic are, and perhaps provide a basic example, much like I did with this video. And yeah, that concludes my my little rant on this particular topic. So please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Hail!